You didn't end up here by mistake, and that might be exactly the problem. You made reasonable choices. You followed a path that wasn't forced on you, at least not obviously. You went to school, picked a career that made sense, built something that functions. Nobody pushed you into it. Nobody held a gun to your head. If someone asked why you ended up here, you could give a coherent answer. The logic holds. And yet, there's a flatness you can't explain. Not unhappiness. Unhappiness has texture, has edges. This is more like absence, a missing signal. You look at your life and you can't find anything specifically wrong, but you also can't find yourself in it. The job is fine, the relationship is fine, the apartment, the city, the routines, all fine. But fine has started to feel like a verdict rather than a description. You don't wake up dreading your days. You just don't wake up anticipating them either. There's no pull, no friction, nothing that resists you, and nothing that draws you. You're not stuck, you're just placed. Like furniture someone arranged years ago that no one's thought to move since. The strange part is that it works. Bills get paid, obligations get met. People around you seem satisfied. From the outside, this looks like success. From the inside, it feels like you're watching someone else's life from very close range. Close enough to operate it. Too close to see it clearly. And here's the question that doesn't get asked enough. At what point does a life stop being wrong and start being simply not yours? Nobody sits you down and says, here's who you're going to be. Here's what you're going to want. Here's what success will mean for you. It doesn't work that way. The inheritance is subtler. It comes in through the things that get praised and the things that get ignored, through what makes people relax and what makes them tense, through the questions that get asked and the ones that never do. You learn early what makes you acceptable, what version of you gets welcomed into the room. And because acceptance feels like safety, you start building toward it. Not dramatically, just a small tilt, repeated over years. You pick the major that makes your parents' voices soften. You date the kind of person that doesn't raise eyebrows. You aim for the job title that sounds like progress. Each choice feels like yours because nobody forced it, but the options you're choosing from were filtered long before you arrived. This is how lives get inherited without anyone noticing, not through commands, but through atmosphere. You absorb a definition of success before you're old enough to question it. You internalize a sense of what a good life looks like, stable, respectable, legible, and you build toward it because it never occurs to you to build towards something else. The alternative isn't forbidden, it just isn't visible. And the most efficient form of control is the one you enforce on yourself. At some point, adaptation stops being a response and becomes the whole structure. You're not adjusting anymore, you're just running the pattern. The goals feel obvious, the choices feel natural, the life feels fine. But underneath, there's a strange absence, the absence of ever having wanted this specifically. You didn't choose it, you arrived at it, through a series of moves that all made sense, none of which felt like decisions. The problem with approval is that it feels so much like alignment. When people nod, when things work, when nobody questions your direction, it's easy to mistake that for being on your path. But approval and alignment are not the same thing. One comes from the outside, the other comes from somewhere harder to locate. And if you've spent your life optimizing for the first, you may have lost track of the second entirely.
The cost doesn't show up where you'd expect. You're not falling apart. You're not failing. By most metrics, you're doing well. The problem is that doing well has started to feel like a performance you've given so many times you can't remember if you ever meant it. Reactions get muted. Good news arrives and you feel a mild acknowledgement, nothing more. Bad news lands and you process it efficiently, like paperwork. You've become someone who handles things, but handling is not the same as experiencing. You're managing your life more than you're living it. Decisions lose their charge. You can make them, you're not paralyzed, but they all feel equivalent. This job or that one, this city or that one, this way of spending your time or another. The options are different, but they produce the same internal response: neutrality. You're not torn because you don't want any of them strongly enough to be torn. Relationships function, but don't feed you. You show up, you do your part, you're good at being present in the ways that are visible, but something in you remains untouched. There's a glass wall between you and the people in your life. They can see you can see them, but nothing quite reaches. Not because they're failing to love you, because the version of you they're connecting with is the one you built for legibility. And that version doesn't have needs. That version doesn't long for anything. That version just cooperates. Here's what's actually happening. The psyche withdraws energy from a life that's being lived too far from the center. Not as punishment, as signal. When what you're doing doesn't connect to something real inside you, the inner world stops investing in it. Interest fades, motivation drains. Everything keeps working on the surface, but the fuel underneath starts running out. This isn't depression. Depression has weight. This is more like a quiet subtraction, a slow leak that nobody notices because everything still looks fine. You're not sick. You're displaced. Living in the right life for someone, just not for you. Recognition doesn't fix anything. Let's be clear about that. Seeing that your life was assembled from inherited expectations, absorbed definitions, years of optimizing for approval. Seeing that doesn't make it untrue. It doesn't give you a new life. It doesn't hand you clarity about what you actually want. What it does is stranger. It introduces friction. For a long time, the path felt smooth because you weren't questioning it. The absence of resistance felt like ease. But ease and alignment aren't the same thing. You were gliding because you'd stopped pushing against anything, including the things that weren't right for you. When you start to see the structure, the smoothness breaks. Not dramatically, just enough to make the automatic feel less automatic. Choices that used to feel obvious start to feel like choices again. The things you do because you've always done them become visible as decisions you could make differently. And that visibility, even though it changes nothing externally, changes everything inside. This is not a breakthrough. It's more like a slow permission. Permission to notice that something doesn't fit. Permission to feel the discomfort instead of explaining it away. Permission to not know what you want, while also knowing that what you have isn't it. There's no guarantee on the other side of this, no promise of happiness or purpose or finally feeling at home. What's there is something simpler, the possibility of a life that's actually yours. Not perfect, not even necessarily better by external measures, just closer. Closer to something that wasn't inherited. Closer to something that might, eventually, produce an internal yes instead of just the absence of no. It takes longer than you want. It's less dramatic than you'd expect. And for a while, it feels worse. Because seeing clearly what doesn't fit is harder than not seeing at all. But the alternative is continuing to live a life that works for everyone except the person inside it. And at some point, the cost of that becomes higher than the cost of looking. This channel is for people who can function anywhere, but are trying to figure out where they actually belong. If that's something you're working through, you can stay.